It looks subjectively average. It's big, bulky, and not the most comfortable bike I have. It's certainly not the fastest, and could use a few good upgrades. If I had to rank my favorite bikes out of all the ones I've tested so far, I'm pretty sure this wouldn't make it onto the top 5 list. So why do I ride the Cruiser Pro from Magicycle more than any other bike I own? In my day-to-day life, when it's just time to go to work and get the job done, why is this the one I pick? The Cruiser Pro is a good example of how investing in the right amount of features can make a bike more practical than its competition, even if it's not as exciting. This is my 7-month review of the Cruiser Pro from Magicycle, and here I'll be sharing with you my thoughts on what I think they got right and where I think they can do better. With limited storage space, and this being a full-size fat tire bike which doesn't make storage any easier, I have to be very selective with which bikes I add upgrades to, as those are the ones I plan on keeping. The Cruiser Pro has been such a workhorse for me that it's the first electric to receive comfort upgrades. Those being a cushy Zacro seat, Zoom suspension seat post, and a stem riser for the handlebars. These are mainly to help complement my height and weight, as the out-of-box comfort on the stock build is fine in my opinion and will suit most riders, but I spend so many hours on this thing that these just make it a little easier on me personally. There's a handful of details as to why this bike is more or less convenient for me and maybe for you, but I'm going to cut straight to the chase as to why this is the bike I pick most of the time when I just need to go somewhere and don't care exactly what I'm riding. And that's mo power equals mo better. I may not be clever enough to come up with a creative acronym to the electric version of there's no replacement for displacement, but something my gas bike enthusiasts know all too well. You can throw the convenient bells and whistles on a bike and make it look pretty, but if it's weak, it sucks. Compared to the 48-volt systems you find on most electric bikes, the 52-volt power plant on the Cruiser Pro gives you more than a noticeable increase in power, having just enough to climb the steepest hills in town, even when I can't be bothered to pedal. And to complement the 52-volt system is a 20 amp-hour battery, which gives me more range than I know what to do with, even when I'm actively trying to drain the battery. Range testing a fat tire bike usually doesn't yield impressive numbers, but they've held their own with the Cruiser Pro. To give you real-world numbers, I have 2 different figures for you for 2 different styles of riding. The first being trail riding conditions, throttle only, no pedaling, cruise control kept at 18 miles an hour, carrying my 200 pounds, plus overnight camping gear, and a second battery. I got 31 miles with 10% left on the first battery. The second being just me with the single battery on asphalt conditions, keeping moderate pedal assist at 15 miles an hour. Once I hit 50 miles, 18% left on the battery, where I just gave up. So I've made it pretty obvious that range and power is the number one reason as why I've turned this into my workhorse compared to all the other bikes. But the details are still important, so let's go ahead and talk about those. I didn't find any deal breakers over the course of my testing, but a lot of these features are hit and miss. The taillight's adequate, but I would like to see it a bit brighter after having tested cheaper bikes with much better taillights. Unfortunately, the headlight's pretty disappointing as well. It's among the weakest I've tested on any electric so far. Good enough to use if that's all you have for about 20 miles an hour at night, but in pitch black situations, it's not bright enough in my opinion for full throttle operations. Thankfully, they're both integrated into the bike's electronics and powered off the battery, so you don't have to recharge them. Braking performance is pretty good. You have a full hydraulic setup on this bike, and it hasn't let me down in any situation. I've been satisfied with the 180mm rotors they put on this bike and happy they didn't go with the smaller 160s that you'll still sometimes see on electric bikes. The 180s provide better stopping power for these heavy bikes and prolong the life of your brake pads. Any bike that you would use as a commuter is more convenient with a rear rack, and that's no exception here. I appreciate the convenience of the pre-installed bungees as well, just one less thing to forget or think about if you have to carry a little bit of cargo. Unfortunately, this rack might have been a bit of an afterthought, as it seems to be too small for the frame of the bike. I found that there's very limited clearance between the rack supports and the rear tire. When loaded down with heavy cargo under rough riding conditions, the rack will actually contact the sidewall of the tire at times, which is bad for obvious reasons. Here I'll take this opportunity to point out that I'm not a fan of the brand name Magicycle. It sounds pretty gimmicky to me. Here in the US market, that's not something that rings very well, and I think they might even have better luck selling bikes that were literally called Fly-By-Night. Some may think who cares about the name if it doesn't affect the performance of the bike, but it's clear that they made no attempt to appeal to this market. Some of these names are getting so bad that I've turned down several companies' bikes for review simply based on the fact that their names were so weird. The sturdy connections on the headset for a front basket should be convenient as well. I plan on adding a basket to this bike. These seem like universal connections, so it should give you a fair amount of options. Despite the bike getting filthy riding in the dirtiest conditions available to me, I've always stayed pretty spotless on this thing thanks to the oversized full coverage fenders. They're plastic as well, which is what I prefer. They make a lot less noise and thanks to them being flexible, should last for, well, the life of the bike. I do wish they would have gone with a push-pull trigger shifter so you don't have to adjust your grip when changing gears instead of this all-thumb shifter, which tends to be a bit annoying at times. But I am thankful for the ergonomic lock-on grips which are easy to adjust and remove if needed. They are using a half-twist throttle with a stiff return spring, and for most of you, you already know I hate these things, but luckily the bike has cruise control, so it doesn't really matter too much. But some riders might be disappointed to hear that I wasn't able to find a way to disable the cruise control. This doesn't affect me personally, I love cruise control, but I hear some riders don't care for it. If you do enjoy cruise control, you'll be happy to hear that the tune on this bike is great when it's activated. It has very subtle and smooth acceleration while engaging just enough power on uphill climbs to not make it feel jarring. That being said, it is a bit funky at times to try and activate the cruise control on this bike. It's a little unpredictable. You'll sometimes think it's activated because the throttle will stop responding, but when you release the throttle, it actually powers down. I'm not sure why this happens, and it doesn't really affect anything. It just seems slow to respond whenever you're trying to get yourself lined out on a straightaway. Unfortunately, another miss for the cruise control on this bike is if you pedal, it deactivates, and I don't like that. Sadly, the throttle does not take priority over pedal assist, which is a criticism I have on a lot of electric bikes, but you do get 9 levels of customizable pedal assist, so it really doesn't matter. One thing is nice, you have full throttle available at all times no matter what pedal assist level you're in, so if you need to accelerate suddenly, you don't have to shift through a bunch of gears or pedal assist levels, you can just hit the throttle and go. A USB charging port on the heads-up display, thank you, you love to see it. Great for charging your phone and other accessories under long rides. And a convenient feature I found while I was camping, if you have a device plugged into the USB charger while the bike's turned on, and then the bike powers off due to inactivity, it will continue to charge your device and give you a readout on the heads-up display that says USB charging. So this was a nice little touch, which I'm glad they added. The stance and geometry of the bike appears to be a good compromise between aggressive and relaxed riding. This allows your pedal assist to feel meaningful, but still allows you to just lean back and relax while the bike does all the work. And the lifted, adjustable handlebars also help to complement whatever style of riding you prefer. Riding through some of the grimiest conditions, the front forks have held up great. Functionally speaking, they don't bottom out under rough riding conditions, then they don't stiffen up when you need them to compress. That's after a bit of adjustment, of course. Visually, they don't look like anything impressive, but they're better than they look. It's safe to say that riders looking at bikes in this price category are considering reliability to be rather important. Well, it's true that with any electric I've tested so far, reliability hasn't been an issue. There's been a couple with some sketchy build quality, but the Cruiser Pro is certainly not one of them. Other than the small issue with the rear rack being too small for the bike, I don't have any problems with how this thing has handled itself. To sum up my thoughts of the Cruiser Pro from Magicycle, the bike could certainly use some more refinement. But the power system is solid, and they got just enough right with the important features that I care about to make it a bike worth considering. My hopes are that they'll take this feedback, along with the power system in this bike, and integrate it into something that's a little more well thought out. The build is by no means disappointing, and it's quite capable of handling day-to-day life for rough riding conditions. I just feel like this bike could have been much better if they'd have taken a little more time to deal with the details. So I hope you guys got some useful information out of today's video, or at the very least were mildly entertained. And until next time, ride safe.